this morning, thanks to the members of the press and to the viewers joining us on the Ohio channel. It is my pleasure to tell you that we are here to announce that in the near future, bipartisan legislation will be introduced in both the Senate and the House to end Ohio's death penalty, replacing those capital cases with life without parole when there is surety of the accused and the capital crime. As many of you know, I first joined Ted Celeste in 2011, along with House and Senate Democrats, as we have worked for over a decade to abolish the death penalty in the state of Ohio. I've introduced a bill every General Assembly since 2011. Many times we have been joined by one or two of our Republican colleagues as they stood with us to end the death penalty. But for the first time, we announced today a bipartisan team of legislators to abolish the death penalty in the state of Ohio. It's time for the state of Ohio to take the compassionate, pragmatic, and economically prudent step to abolish the death penalty, which has been found to be expensive, impractical, unjust, inhumane, and even erroneous. It's a punishment which is shown to be administered with disparities across racial and economic lines and has failed as a deterrent to crime. It's never resulted in the return of one murder victim to their families and their loved ones. I believe that as a society, we must be better than our worst criminals and our flawed judicial system, criminal system. So today, as we announce our intention to introduce and pass bipartisan legislation in the Senate to end the death penalty and move to life without parole for capital crimes, I am joined, along with my joint sponsor, Steve Huffman. We are working with perhaps the strongest bipartisan team of members in the Senate and the House. Our goal is to soon have companion pieces of legislation in the House and the Senate aimed at ending the death penalty. I'm pleased to be joined this morning by a list of colleagues, both new in their support, as well as those who have been persistently working for an end to the death penalty for many years. But all of us are joined in the shared desire to end Ohio's death penalty now. And we will begin remarks this morning with introducing my joint sponsor, Steve Huffman from the 5th Senate District. Thank you.
Unmute off. Thank you, Nickie. Today is a turning point for Ohio. It's time to end the death penalty. I'm sponsoring a bill that will end the death penalty in the state of Ohio. Like so many Ohioans, I once supported capital punishment, and over time, with prayer and reflection, I've come to believe it's the wrong policy for the state of Ohio. I've been heading in this direction for decades. Life is precious. As a medical doctor and a person of faith, I strongly believe in the sanctity of life. I also believe in a strong, swift punishment of the worst of the worst. The pain suffered by the family of murdered victim is real. They need closure. Life in prison is a terminal sentence. It gives families the assurance that the person who murdered their loved ones will spend the rest of their natural life behind bars. The killer will die in prison. In fact, given how long drawn out the process has become, a death inmate is much more likely to die of a disease or old age than execution. That's why now is the time to pass this landmark change in Ohio law. First, recent changes in protocols from the pharmaceutical companies have made it nearly impossible to secure the drugs used for lethal injection. Governor DeWine has made that clear. He's left it up to the General Assembly to take the next step. My fellow members of the General Assembly and I ban the death penalty for those diagnosed with severe mental illness. This was another step towards where we are today. From conviction to execution, the appeals process takes decades, but it's not just time, it's taxpayer money. Capital punishment is more expensive than the cost of life in prison. A recent news article stated that in 2014 alone, taxpayers spent $17 million on death penalty and death row related costs. Most troubling, we know wrongful convictions, though rare, are possible. The possibility of execution, even one innocent person, is unacceptable. Our justice system makes mistakes and death can't be undone. Most importantly for me, human life is precious. It's not the role of the government to end the lives of its citizens. Our justice system must protect the public from killers by locking
Ohio
them.
Trust.
Okay, so you're connected to the Zoom call?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Our
I'm
justice
sorry,
system,
someone needs to mute, please. Everybody should be on mute. I'm so sorry, Senator. Please continue.
that's all right. Our justice system must protect the public from killers by locking them up on the most secure prisons for the rest of their life. That means no parole, no early release, no easy way out. If this law passes, Ohio will join many states in moving towards serious and tough sentences for murders without getting involved in the broken death penalty process. I want to thank co-sponsor Senator Nickie Antonia for her assistance on this important measure. She's a responsible and thoughtful member of the General Assembly. I look forward to working with her as we make our case to the Senate, and eventually the House in governmental line. So thank you very much. And Nickie, you can introduce the next person.
Thank you so much. And we're also, I'm pleased that we're joined also by Senator Christina Roadner. Senator Roadner.
All right. Thank you so much for inviting me again, this General Assembly. I'm once again proud to be a co-sponsor of this legislation to end the death penalty in Ohio. When I came into the General Assembly back in 2011, I was in the House for 8 years, served with Senator, at the time, Representative Antonia. We started together. I was very much in favor of the death penalty. I thought if you were guilty beyond a shadow of a doubt, and I mean, they knew it, then, you know, go ahead and end that person's life. But the more I thought about it and prayed about it, and I am 100% pro-life. I mean, those of you that have worked with me for any length of time know that I am a proud sponsor of bills to protect life at the beginning stages of life. So the unborn. But the more I thought about it, I'm like, you know, life is sacred. It's sacred from conception to natural death. And, you know, so, and yeah, while I've done a lot of work on the front end of that equation, there is certainly work to be done on the back end too. And while the unborn certainly are very innocent, and the folks we're talking about now are guilty, I mean, their life has value. And then also, I am a Christian, and there were a couple stories in the Bible that resonated with me. And specifically, one is there's that woman that was going to be stoned because of she had committed adultery, and I get the capital punishment that accompanied that crime was stoning in the day. And Jesus said, "Let the person without sin cast the first stone." And it struck me like, wow, you know, certainly none of us are without sin, and he saw value in that woman's life, even if all the people in the mob didn't at the time. And then, and of course, at that point, then she's redeemed. I mean, she's found redemption, and you know, we don't know what happened with her as her life went on. But the second story was on the cross. So there was Jesus in the middle. There were two criminals on either side, and one of them asked for forgiveness. You know, so at the very final few hours before he dies, you know, he asked for forgiveness, and Jesus said, "Today I'll be with you in paradise." And so he also found redemption. And so what happens if we cut that person's life short through the death penalty in the state of Ohio? You know, maybe that person could be in prison and write a book that actually then will save other people's lives. I mean, that life could still have value. We just don't know what it would be. So certainly, I don't think that person should get off easy. It's life without parole. I'm all for, you know, making them work and pay some retribution, and you know, they should in fact suffer for their crimes. But the other thing is the families of the victims, and I think Senator Huffman alluded to that. They need closure too, and in many ways, if someone's on the death penalty, it could keep coming back up, and they might have to keep coming back to the courts, and they have to keep dealing with it. But if it's life without parole, that's done. I mean, that person's not getting out of prison. They don't have to worry about that person ever again. They don't have to see that person ever again. So, and I think in many ways, it also would help the families of the victims too. So for all those reasons, I am supportive of this bill. And I would encourage everyone on this call too, that is supporting ending the death penalty to also, I don't know where you all stand on the front end of this equation, you know, protecting the unborn, but if you have not been protective of the unborn, I would say just search your heart like I have mine and see if you can't find a reason to protect life, the sanctity of life. Let's defend it from conception to natural death. Thank you, Senator Antonio, for organizing this today. Thank you for all the work you do to end the death penalty in the state of Ohio. You're on mute, Senator Antonio.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. And now we'll be joined by Senator Niraj Antani. Senator Antani joined me when we were both in the House and now joins us again in the Senate. Welcome, Senator Antani.
Well, thank you, Senator Antonio, and for all of your leadership on this issue. It's great to be with you all. You know, like Senator Antonio said, 6 years ago in 2015, when I was a freshman in the Ohio House of Representatives, I joined Senator Antonio then as the first Republican main sponsor of a bill to repeal the death penalty. My predecessor, then State Representative Terry Blair, was among the first Republican co-sponsors of a bill to repeal the death penalty. And I said then, and I will say now that, you know, we have seen process in the conservative movement, in the Republican Party on this issue with exactly what Senator Huffman and Senator Roadner were saying. This is a pro-life issue, and whether you believe all life is sacred or all innocent life, even if you believe all innocent life is sacred, you know, we know about the exonerations. We know about those who've been put on death row mistakenly. And so this is a pro-life issue. It is a conservative issue. When Senator Antonio and I joint sponsored that bill in 2015, you know, I didn't see the votes, let's be honest. And I said that, you know, we should only try again once we've made more progress. That time is now. We now are going to have a Republican-sponsored bill with Senator Huffman in the Senate, a Republican-sponsored bill in the House. We've got multiple Republican co-sponsors here. The movement is growing. I believe we have the votes. I believe that with the governor's moratorium on putting people to death on death row, now is the time to repeal the death penalty. This is a conservative issue. Now is the time. And I'm happy to have joined this movement with Senator Antonio, you know, 6 years ago. And 6 years ago, you know, people said to me, what are you doing? You're going to ruin your career as a Republican, as a conservative on this issue. And I said, no, I said, our party will see the light. Our party will see that this is a pro-life issue. Our party will see that this is an anti-big government issue. And our party will come around. And now is that time. And so it's taken us 6 years to get here. And I look forward to working here on the Senate side with the main sponsors of the bill, Senator Huffman and Senator Antonio, in order to get this done. And I will say that, you know, while I believe this is a conservative issue, you know, we have to recognize and appreciate the arguments that our Democrat friends make. It is true that there are severe racial disparities when it comes to the death penalty. African Americans are put to death at a much higher rate than white Americans. African Americans are targeted for capital crimes much more than white Americans. I think we as Republicans have to understand that, have to recognize that, and have to stand up on that argument as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Antani. And now we'll be joined by another staunch advocate to end the death penalty, Senator Sandra Williams.
Thank you, Senator Antonio, and thanks for allowing me to be a part of this press conference today. I do want to apologize. That was me speaking when Senator Huffman was speaking, so my apologies there. Today, I am happy to join Senator Huffman and Senator Antonio in their bill to end the death penalty. Over the last several years, I have been a sponsor of several bills. One dealing with post-conviction relief with Senator Sykes, and one dealing with serious mental illness with Senator Eklund. Both of those bills have recently passed the legislature. As a matter of fact, we all know that in 2011, the Ohio Supreme Court created a task force to study the death penalty and came up with 56 recommendations. We have brought a lot of bills dealing with those recommendations to the forefront. But it is my belief that the best thing we can do instead of piecemealing the state's policy on the death penalty is to really end it all. We all know the facts. They're out there as to why we should end the death penalty. Senator Antoni talked about the fact that African Americans are put to death or sentenced to death more often than whites. We know that. We should also know that depending on where you live, depending on who is the prosecutor, or depending on the judge or the jury, that also determines who gets the death penalty. You can be in one county, do one thing, and be sentenced to death, and you can be on the other side of the state, do the exact same thing, and not be sentenced to death. The system is totally unfair. And finally, I would say this. I don't think human beings should be deciding who lives and who dies. I think Senator Roadner was right. We look at the Bible, we are not the ones to be the judge and the jury. I think we should leave that up to God. And so with that, I hope that the legislature will once and for all end the death penalty. And that concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Williams. Now, one of the things that I announced at the beginning of this press conference is the fact that there will be activity also on the House side. Members are talking to each other right now, and in the future we'll introduce as well. So we're going to start the remarks from the House. We have 3 House members, and I'm just going to read them off right now, and if they can come on in succession. We're going to start with Representative Bride Sweeney, who has worked on this issue in past GAs, Reps Adam Miller and Rep Jean Schmidt. So we're going to start with Representative Bride Sweeney. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Senator Antonio, for inviting the House to be a part of this, and for also inviting me. I want to keep my remarks brief, as going this far down the line, a lot of people say the reasons why that you're supportive of why you're on this call. My kind of journey to this issue was when I was in college at John Carroll University, where I actually went to a talk of somebody in Ohio that was actually exonerated from the death penalty, and actually talking to that individual and meeting somebody who was within days of being put to death, who then turned out later on to have actually been found to be innocent, was really, forever and always has changed my perspective on this issue, and actually led me to studying this within college. And really, outside of the surface level of what we understand of the issues with this, actually studying it, and really the impact of all the disparities that have been already talked about, racial, demographics, geographics. That's something, especially me and Senator Antonio and Senator Williams are from the same county, Cuyahoga County. There was a report in 2019 that in Cuyahoga County, we sentenced more people to the death penalty than anywhere in the United States. So if you are from our county, you are more likely. Doesn't matter what the crime was, doesn't mean we have more violent crimes. It's just a fact of who we have serving here and kind of what kind of standard we've set in our county. And that should scare all of us. And I think that one of the great things at this moment in time on this particular issue is that there's no shortage of reasons why people are supporting this. We have people from different counties, from different parties, but with one final goal. And, for me, at the end of the day, I just think that government should never be so powerful that it has the ability and the power to put to death the same people that's charged to protect. And I'm looking forward to working tirelessly in the House with my colleagues, with many other people who aren't on the call that are also involved in this, to make sure once and for all, for Ohio taxpayers and for anyone going through our criminal justice system, we can finally get this right on their behalf. Thank you.
I think we got a little problem. We can't hear Representative.
Okay, there's a little technical difficulty. I think we'll come back to Representative Miller and Schmidt because we can't hear them right now. So we're gonna, unless you've got it fixed. Nope. Okay. We're going to move on to Ohioans to Stop Executions, Hannah Kubins, who this organization has been working tirelessly on this issue, and we're happy to have them as a partner. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Hannah.
Oh, I think the representatives have their audio working, so I'm happy to.
Hannah, go ahead.
Okay.
Hannah, go ahead.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Hannah Cubbins, and I'm the Executive Director of Ohioans to Stop Executions and the OTSI Action Fund. Our supporters and partner organizations represent the views of hundreds of thousands of Ohioans across the state. The question about what to do with Ohio's death penalty has been brought up before, but as today reveals and the coming weeks will show, this year is different. Ohio is ready to end a costly and risky policy that delivers nothing but harm. And with our sponsors at the helm, we will have an unprecedented bipartisan dialogue to address the question of whether Ohio's death penalty is sustaining. We know so much more now than we did 40 years ago when this policy was enacted, and we can no longer justify the death penalty knowing what we know. Across the country, Americans from every political persuasion are saying enough, and for good reason. There have been way too many mistakes. There are over 170 death row exonerees, and 11 of those people from Ohio. Ohio has executed 56 people since its reinstatement of capital punishment, which means for every 5 executions, there's been one person exonerated. Wrongful convictions happen at every level of the criminal legal system, but when there is a life on the line, the system has to work. The 170 plus exonerees are living proof that it doesn't. Enough. The stain of racism affects every step of the process. The death penalty, with its brutal history of racial injustice, is the epitome of all that is broken in the criminal justice system. Studies have repeatedly shown that in Ohio's death penalty system, white lives are valued over Black and brown lives. While people of color make up less than 50% of Ohio's population, they make up 56% of Ohio's death penalty, 33% of those executed, and 66% of those exonerated. 75% of Ohio's executions have involved a white victim. Enough. There are too many costly distractions from justice and public safety, and too much added pain for victims. The death penalty is not nor does it prevent future violence. The excess millions of dollars taxpayers spend on death penalty cases is solely funding security theater. As Ohio is trying to get back on the road to economic recovery, and as there is increasing crime survivors for services to help heal their trauma, it makes no sense to continue funding a system with taxpayer dollars that cannot even be carried out. Enough. But there is one thing the death penalty does deliver: more pain. As you will hear shortly from Jonathan, the death penalty drags murder victim family members through an agonizing and lengthy process that holds out the false promise of healing through an execution that most of the time does not happen. We can do better. Enough is enough. It's time to repeal Ohio's death penalty and focus on what matters: creating a fair and effective criminal legal system. On behalf of OTSI and our partners, I thank Senators Antonio and Huffman, Representatives Miller, Schmidt, and Sweeney for their leadership on this issue, and I look forward to seeing this campaign through.
Thank you, Hannah. And if Representatives Miller and Schmidt are ready, we're going to come back to you. You have your sound now.
There, can you hear us now, Senator
Yes.
Antonio and colleagues? Okay. Great. This is Representative Miller. For me, this is a national security issue. As someone who has worked with our forces overseas, directing rule of law, fighting terror, it's a huge problem when we finally capture the worst of the worst on the battlefield, but we cannot get extradition. We cannot work to exploit the information available to us because there are too many US states that have the death penalty and our allies are bound not to work with us. It's a huge problem. These are really bad people. we need to make the United States safe from terrorism. For me, it's a national security issue. Agree with all of the remarks that have gone before, and I really appreciate the leadership that Representative, now Senator Antonio, and our other co-sponsors and my joint sponsor, Representative Schmidt, are shown on this issue. It's really important we get this done now. Representative Schmidt.
Thank you. And this has been a long journey for me. 20 years ago, I served in this very state house as a state legislator, and I fought to keep the death penalty. But I have evolved. And my involvement began when I met Joe D'Ambrosio, who was convicted and on death row for a murder he did not commit. It's an inspiring story. And it got me to thinking that we have to make sure that we never kill an innocent person. And when you look at the statistics, since the 70s, when we reinstated the death penalty, there have been 56 people since the reinstatement of the death penalty on death row. There are 170 death row exonerees. 9 of those individuals call Ohio home. That means that for every 6 executions in Ohio, 1 person has been exonerated. Had Joe D'Ambrosio not met Father Neil Kuthi, we would have lost an innocent person. It is time to end the death penalty. Life in prison without parole will be a hard punishment for those individuals that deserve it. I ask my colleagues to think about this hard and to join me on the journey to end the death penalty and make sure that we protect the innocent. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our representatives. Thank you for that, Representative Schmidt and Miller. And we look forward to working with you across the chambers as well. We're now going to hear from one of those exonerees. Kwame Ajume is a death row exoneree, and it's my pleasure to see you again, Kwame, and have you join us today for some remarks.
Thank you so much. First and foremost, let me say thank you to you and all of your associates who are involved in this big task that we have before us. I want to say that I am, of course, the chairman of Witness to Innocence, and that our organization is comprised of its sole membership being, like myself, death row exonerees. We're very happy to be here today. Even more so excited over the fact that you have developed this newly formed bipartisan support group to end capital punishment in the state of Ohio. Big ups to you guys, and we support you 100%. As you know, I am a survivor of Ohio's death row. And along with my brother, Wiley Bridgman and Ricky Jackson, we were wrongfully convicted in 1975 and sentenced to death row. Because of prosecutorial misconduct and police misconduct. The Cleveland, Cuyahoga County Police Department did coerce a 12-year-old boy into testifying wrongfully and convicting the 3 of us, and thus sentenced us to die. I spent 3 years on death row, and the subsequent of 25 years thereafter in the penitentiary itself. I was released from death row in 1978 due to the Sandra Lockett decision admitting that capital punishment was indeed unconstitutional in the state of Ohio. And to this day, that's Sandra is, I just love Sandra Lockett so much for having filed that case. I was released in 2003, but it was not until 2014 that I was exonerated after all those years of fighting to free myself and my brother and my friend, as I was the first one to be, I went through the system and actually got paroled. Wiley and Ricky spent respectively 38 and 39 years incarcerated because of the atrocities of 1975. In fact, there are 11 now, Ohio death row exonerees, where we thought there were 9. And the new evidence come out today from the Death Row Information Center, and lets us know that, and I actually was in prison with these 2 guys and didn't know, Thomas Pearson and Charles Tolliver, respectively, from Cuyahoga County, had been sentenced to die as well, wrongfully, I might admit. And Pearson was convicted in 1976, at the time that I was on death row, and exonerated there in 1980, wherein Tolliver was convicted in 1986 and exonerated in 1988. The other 9 exonerees, and I want to name them to you, were Gary Beeman, Dale Johnston, who is like 85 years old and now suffering from dementia, Timothy Howard, Gary Lamar James, Derek Jameson. I'm sure all of you have met Derek Jameson in some form or fashion. And this man was just mentioned 2 minutes ago, Joe D'Ambrosio, who is a good friend of mine as well. I wish that Joe had been here today, but we couldn't get him. The death penalty information keeps an official list of the people who have been wrongfully incarcerated and sentenced to die. The news released today of the death penalty information system identifies 11 new cases, which brings our innocent total from 174 guys now to 185 wrongfully exonerated men and women. 2 of these cases are from Ohio, and I just mentioned that. But the thing about that is that it now makes Ohio, the state of Ohio, in twin connections right with Philadelphia County in Pennsylvania, having the 2nd highest number of exonerations in the county, each having 6. The county with the most death row exonerations is Cook County, Illinois, at 15. Illinois' track record with wrong convictions was a major part of why the state of Illinois abolished capital punishment in 2011. Who needs to follow this path? So now, nationwide, for every 8 executions that have been carried out in our country, 1 innocent person has been exonerated and freed. In Ohio, for every 5 prisoners we have executed, 1 has been exonerated and freed. Ohio sent 11 people to death row who are later exonerated and freed. These are just the ones that we know about. And we wonder truly, how many are there we don't know about? We ask you, and we wonder how many are still on death row innocent. Ohio legislators have had an opportunity to put protections in place that would address the problem of wrongful convictions in our state. As previously mentioned, 56 recommendations were made to the legislation by the Supreme Court Task Force on the administration of Ohio's death penalty in 2014. 13 of those recommendations of the task force would help prevent future wrongful incarcerations. To date, none of these protections have been acted upon by state lawmakers, not one. They haven't even talked about them. The recommendations included things like the following. We required a certification of criminal labs, electronic recordings of in-custody interrogations, enacting legislative starting the death penalty can only be imposed with DNA, videotaped conversations or confessions, or when other compelling evidence is present. Disallowing the so-called snitch testimony. So we know where that goes. The systems makes mistakes. We all know that. And in-person is, and when a person is next executed, the mistake becomes irreversible. We can't take it back. They won't even talk about fixing the problem. And that is why we must abolish Ohio's death penalty. The wrongful execution of even one person It's far too much. I'm excited to be growing a bipartisan support for this bill. Thank you, Senators Antonio and Senators Huffman, for your unwavering leadership and for all of these years. And you and I go back a few. And thank you, Steve Huffman, for your co-sponsoring the bill and representing the many conservative leaders across the country. In conclusion, I want to say that ending the capital punishment in the state of Ohio would be like pulling a thorn out of my eye, putting more blood into my heart to pump freedom and life. I want to thank you guys for allowing myself and my organization and all of my constituents to be a part of your bipartisan's ploy. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Next, we also are very honored to be joined by Jonathan Mann. It's been mentioned more than once what the death penalty, the toll it takes on families. And Jonathan has been a staunch leader, raising his voice to talk about what happens to the families of victims. So thanks so much for being here with us today, Jonathan.
Senator Antonio, thank you for having me. Before I make my remarks, I do want to echo something that Representative Sweeney mentioned regarding geography. I was born, raised, and my father was murdered in Senator Antonio's district in Cuyahoga County. So her remarks regarding geography, to say that they hit home would be saying it lightly. Susan A. Bandace is the Centennial Distinguished Professor of Law Emeritus at DePaul University. In a January 8th article written for the Crime Report, Professor Bandace explored the misleading myth of closure for victim family members. The most telling finding is that a number of family members feel relieved simply because they're finally free of the legal system, Bandace wrote. As Matthew Shepard's parents and the Richard family, victims of the Boston Marathon bombing, understood, much of the pain comes from the capital system itself, lengthy, heart-wrenching legal proceedings in which the family would be called to testify and the defendant would remain at the center stage for years. A 2012 study published in the Marquette Law Review compared the experiential well-being of family members of victims in Texas and Minnesota. Texas has the death penalty and Minnesota does not. The study found the family members in Minnesota had, quote, higher levels of physical, psychological, and behavioral health. I don't need highly regarded law professors or published studies to help me understand the collateral damage of the death penalty. I live it. My dad was murdered, and the state responded in two ways. It told me I was ineligible to receive state-provided burial help and counseling support for his murder because he had drugs in his system at the time of his death. I was then told that the state would spend millions of dollars seeking death for the person who killed him. My family and I have become trapped in the legal system. There is no end in sight, and family members of murder victims wait decades for the process to end. There is no path to closure, healing, or justice in sight. This situation is quite common. Proponents of the death penalty often say we need the death penalty for victims, but do not address the reality of what that means. Having a death penalty, in my view and through my experience, does not serve victims' families. What it does is shift attention and resources from the people who desperately need it. Instead of spending money on a death sentence, the state needs to discuss and fund ways for people like me to heal. I'm fortunate to have a good job with excellent insurance along with an amazing support system of family and friends. But this isn't just about me. There were 350 combined homicides in Cleveland and Columbus last year. Most survivors might not be as fortunate as me. These families shouldn't have to go through this impossible healing process without services like burial assistance and grief counseling. The state offers these services only during an active murder case. According to the FBI Uniform Crime Report in 2019, it noted on average 40% of homicides go unsolved. 140 families last year won't get the chance for closure, assistance to manage their trauma, or help to put their lives back together. If we care about victims and their family members, policy changes need to be made. Reversing the current policy would be extremely impactful. Thank you, Senators Antonio, Huffman, Roadner, Antani, and Williams. Thank you, Representatives Miller, Sweeney, and Schmidt. You represent a rapidly growing bipartisan group of Ohio lawmakers who recognize it's time for a change. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, we're also joined by Dr. Reverend Jack Sullivan from the Ohio Council of Churches, long a supporter of ending the death penalty, and we welcome you today. Thank you for being with us.
You're welcome, and thank you for inviting me, Senator Antonio. I begin by acknowledging that the public has every right to be outraged over violent, horrific acts that distort or destroy the lives of our fellow citizens, our neighbors, public servants, and more. To be very specific, family members of murdered persons, often called co-victims, a label that I myself have been forced to wear after the 1997 murder of my younger sister in Cleveland, we are justified in harboring feelings of rage and anger over the killing of our loved ones. Our sentiments, our reactions to the calculated, unethical, and immoral decision-making that drove other human beings to engage in grotesque, murderous acts that abruptly ended the lives of other human beings, our family members, and forever altered the direction of families and communities across Ohio. As we Ohioans acknowledge our frustration over acts of murder, the urgent questions before us are, how do we respond to violent, murderous crime? What is our response to rightfully and properly convicted people who have angered us and hurt us the most? While I am a co-victim, I'm also a man of Christian faith who represents thousands of hope-infused Christians who participate in the Ohio Council of Churches, a body that brings together 17 Ohio-based Christian denominations. Through these intersecting identities, I advance the belief that whether a life-ending act is carried out on a Cleveland street or in a Chillicothe prison as authorized by the state, killing is wrong. To be sure, homicide, to show that homicide is abhorrent, is itself abhorrent. When rivers swell and flood our communities, and I experienced such flooding years ago when I lived in Findlay, Ohio, no life-honoring responders would dare add more water to a flood, for such would be counterproductive. Instead, they would try to stop the flow of water, to stop the flooding. Accordingly, the cycle of calculated, unethical, and immoral acts that lead to homicide in our neighborhoods is not stopped by the state's own brand of calculated, unethical, and immoral homicidal acts called executions. Executions only exacerbate the cycle of death while they erode the state's moral credibility. As Senator Roadner pointed out, Jesus was once asked to authorize a public stoning execution of a woman caught in the act of adultery. Interestingly, her male counterpart was not convicted and condemned, an early sign of bias in the ethically bankrupt execution business. Of course, racial bias exists in death sentencing today. And sometimes, as our brother Kwame pointed out, the wrong people are convicted and executed. When Jesus told the woman's all-male jury that they could stone her only if they themselves were sinless, the jurors walked away because, of course, they were not sin-free. Sparked by love and justice, Jesus disrupted an execution and redeemed a life destined to be thrown away. People can change. Consider Moses, David, and Paul, biblical leaders with murder on their resumes. Yet God transformed them into being pillars of our faith. Out of a sense of love and concern for justice, the Ohio Council of Churches calls on Ohio legislators to avoid adding water to a flood, to resist matching immoral death with more immoral death. No one, regardless of what they have done, should ever be discarded. We join you, Senator Antonio, Senator Huffman, and your courageous bipartisan team of colleagues, but you are a clear and present sign of hope for our state. Thank you for calling for the end of the death penalty in Ohio. For the death penalty is a hollow instrument of death that offers victim families no justice, no healing, no closure, and no redemption. We call for the state to invest in true redemption through funding victim families who need restoration, not revenge. Senator Antonio, we owe you and your colleagues a debt of gratitude for your courageous leadership in seeking to end Ohio's death penalty. Let the word go forth that today you have the full support of the Ohio Council of Churches. We will mobilize churches statewide to make sure that every member of this current General Assembly receives a flood of messages from their constituents. We will make sure that there will be no doubt in anyone's mind that voters like us want to end executions, and that Christians, sparked by the witness of Jesus during this very Lenten season, we are saying no to retribution, no to vengeance, no to retaliation, and yes to love, yes to redemption, and yes to restoration of victim families. May God bless your efforts, and may God bless our state. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Reverend Sullivan. Thank you. And now we are going to turn to remarks from Jim Tobin from the Ohio Catholic Conference.
Thank you,
I'm sorry, was I muted? Yes. Jim Tobin is next from the Ohio Catholic Conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I will have to also thank you for letting me follow Father Reverend Jack Sullivan and his wonderful words. Really, after all that's been said, let me say amen. Amen. Again, I say amen to all that has been said here. I want you to know that the Catholic bishops of Ohio strongly support passage of this bill. And we too commend all the sponsors and co-sponsors, and we will work diligently to educate our constituents as well as advocate among the General Assembly for passage at this time. So thank you all very, very much.
Thank you so much, Jim, and for that support. We've been a long time working on this together, so thanks for being here again in the Catholic Conference. And next we have Father Chris Whitman from the Society of Mary. Thank you for joining us today.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you. Yes, I am a member of the Marianists, the Society of Mary, sometimes known as the Marianists, within the Catholic Church, a religious congregation of brothers and priests in a family that includes Marianist sisters and Marianist laypersons. As Jim Tobin just said, the Catholic teaching on opposing the death penalty has only become more clear and more decisive in recent decades. Many good things have been said. I agree with all of them. I will just perhaps add a little bit of emphasis in a couple of areas. Ohio has a department called the Department of Rehabilitation and Correction that our prison system falls under. It should be abundantly clear to everyone that execution is not rehabilitation and execution is not correction. As Reverend Dr. Sullivan said, it is revenge. It is vengeance. The Bible says that vengeance belongs to the Lord, not to human beings. We have been hearing recently about the need to acknowledge not just personal individual forms of racism and discrimination, but structural forms, institutional forms, systemic forms. The death penalty in Ohio and really in the rest of our country is a prime example of the way that racism and injustice has become structurally instituted into our society, into our government processes. It draws on a shameful history that is undeniably tied to the belief that some people were less than fully human. And as many have already noted, the fact that still today in Ohio and in every other state where the death penalty continues, a disproportionate number of people of color are executed, tells us we have not freed ourselves from that shameful legacy. And there is no way to correct the death penalty to do that, other than to eliminate it. Many have spoken eloquently already about the connection between faith, Christian faith in particular, and a concern about the dignity of all life. However, I'd like to appeal to people of other faiths and of no faith. It doesn't take a person of faith to recognize that to have a coherent philosophy of life that respects human life and the dignity of human life, we can't, as Reverend Sullivan and others have said, we can't on the one hand defend human life and still be willing to execute people. The death certificate after an execution says homicide. The cause of death is homicide, state-sponsored homicide. Ohio is on the wrong side right now of the arc of history. It's the right thing to repeal the death penalty and to continue other reforms of our criminal justice system. So I thank Senator Antonio, Senator Huffman for co-sponsoring this bill, for all the other senators and representatives who are forming this inspiring team of bipartisan support. I will be praying for the efforts, and I will commit myself to continuing to work for these efforts and invite others, whether you're a praying person or not, whether you're a good intention person or not, a positive energy person, to commit yourself to this effort, as well as the work necessary to convince hearts and minds that this is the right thing to do for Ohio, for our nation, really for the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Father Whitman, for joining us. I also want to thank members of the Senate who are not with us this morning, but have already expressed their interest in signing on to the bill. We are going to be sending a co-sponsor request out this week. So our work is not done even with finding folks that want to join us on the bill. This is just the beginning. But right now, I want to thank Senators Ruley, Craig, Sykes, and Thomas, who have also expressed their interest to sign on to this bill. So right now in the Senate, we have 4 Republicans and 5 Democrats who have expressed an interest to sign on as co-sponsors. We expect there to be more on both sides of the aisle. Certainly, it's going to take all of us working together to make this kind of monumental change in Ohio. Progressive Democrats, conservative Republicans, and everyone in the middle. I think one of the messages that came through loud and clear this morning is this is not a Democrat or a Republican issue. This is an issue about our humanity going forward and redemption and an end to an execution process that's state sanctioned. That's what we're talking about. And this is against the backdrop of public opinion across the country, which is really coming to the point, joining the clarion call to abolish the death penalty. And it's time for Ohio to join and respond to that call. And with that, we will be happy to do our best to answer any questions from the press. And so Julia, I'm not sure if you have questions or if you're actually going to, or if we're going to hear from the press on the call.
You'll hear directly from reporters.
Okay.
Hi, this is Marty Schladen at the Ohio Capitol Journal. Can you all hear me?
Yes, Marty, we can.
So the public opinion polling seems to indicate this, and just anecdotally, I'm not hearing a lot of people who are fighting to keep the death penalty anymore. As you have talked to your fellow lawmakers about this, are you getting much pushback?
Actually, Senator Huffman, do you want to go at this first? Because I know you've been talking to some of your colleagues. I can certainly say that as I've talked to colleagues on both sides of the aisle, I've gotten very little pushback. Senator Huffman?
I think there's a lot of people that are continuing to think about it, especially in the Senate, that they know that it's out there. They know that the public opinion is to get rid of it. I think they're continuing to form their thoughts, and but I believe the majority are leaning to vote to get rid of the death penalty.
Thank you.
Hi, it's Andrew Welsh Huggins with the Associated Press. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Andrew. Good morning.
Thanks.
Good to see you. Good to hear you.
So sort of to follow up on Marty's question, you know, with the comments of people like Senator Huffman and Representative Schmidt, you know, I am hearing some new voices in this debate. But, you know, I'm also hearing from people that we've heard from before on this debate, Senator Antoni and Senator Roadner, for example. And I'm also, the arguments you're putting forth to end capital punishment, you know, we've heard these same arguments for years now. So I guess I'm just wondering, playing devil's advocate, what is really new in February of 2021 that makes you think there's any more momentum to do this than in past years?
Thanks for the question, Andrew. I anticipated it. I think what's new is that instead of an individual from the Republican side of the aisle, you are hearing about a team. There is a team right now that is dedicated to removing, ending the death penalty in Ohio. I think that's what's new. I think that's what we're announcing. And that team can only get larger. As we continue to talk to our members, we may see more people join in the co-sponsorship. But I also believe that as we have hearings and as we continue to have the discussion and the debate in both chambers, that there will be this momentum to move forward. And I think that's something we have not seen in the past. In the past, what we've seen is the introduction of a bill and sponsor testimony. And then we've not, and one time, one General Assembly, we actually had proponent testimony when Justice Pfeiffer came in and testified, but that was many years ago. I think there's a shift in the country that's also being reflected in the state. We also have a governor who has put a moratorium on executions right now. There is difficulty in even being able to, I think it's an oxymoron, but humanely execute someone. And there's also, we've already talked about the cost factor. So there's all these things. Do we have a new argument to end the death penalty? No, we're saying the same things we've said in the past, but we're saying them with a stronger voice.
Senator Antonio, may I jump in on that?
Yes, please.
Andrew, great question. You know, I've been at this now for 6 years. And like I said, when I came out against the death penalty 6 years ago, you know, people looked at me and said, look, your career was over. In fact, I almost got a primary opponent in 2016. Will Bach was his name. He almost primaried me because of my stance on the death penalty. But Andrew, look, you know, Max Weber, German philosopher, said that politics is the slow boring of hard boards, right? The death penalty is a very complicated issue. It's not an issue that people think about think about on their own, right? You really have to grapple with it and think about it. And so I think, at least in my party, you know, I think we've seen that shift over the years as we continue to make the argument, okay? And I will also say that, you know, I want to give Hannah Cubbins, who's on this call, credit, and Ohio Stop Executions. Hannah, I think, has talked to every Republican member in the Ohio General Assembly on this, at least in the last GA. I think, obviously, with the new members in the new GA, that's still being worked on, the freshmen. But all of the returning members, she has talked to personally, and we know we have the votes. We know that the votes exist, obviously, with our Democratic colleagues, but there are enough Republican votes to supplement the Democratic votes to get this done. And that, I think, Andrew, has changed. Number one is that the argument is working over the last 6 years. And number two is that the grassroots have done the work, have whipped the votes to show that we can actually get this done.
I would just add that in terms of the Veterans Caucus, Andrew, veterans, those of us who served in the last 5 years overseas, other veterans going back, Vietnam, Gulf War, Desert Storm, we really understand the impact to national security if we can shorten those points between our coalition allies in the United States military to handle some of the worst in our fight against terrorism. So all of the faith-based and hard work that's gone before makes a very strong, compelling argument. I am seeing some new open-mindedness in the Veterans Caucus that's very, very encouraging. And as Senator Antoni just said, it will give us a little more breathing room on both sides. Thank you.
You know, Andrew, I think the other thing that you're hearing, that you heard from Senator Antoni, from Representative Miller, and the other Senator Huffman when he spoke earlier, and Senator Roadner, is that legislators are talking to each other. We're talking to each other one-on-one. So they're having the meetings that Hannah's been doing such a good job of organizing. And members are talking to each other about this issue. And so there has been an evolution, I think, in spite of term limits, by the way, which you have to keep starting all over with relationship and an understanding, a threshold of understanding of an issue. But in spite of that, I think those conversations have been intentional. Certainly in the conversations I've been in with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, but all of us talking one-on-one with each other. So there's every effort that we've put into this just continues to evolve, I think, to get us to this point.
Thank you.
So my communications people are telling me, I think that's all of our questions, unless there is someone that has a question. So I just want to thank all of you so much. I feel like I've been to church this morning. Thank you so much for that. And I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward to a day when I can give each and every one of you a big hug, which I can't do right now. But I'm looking forward to this process going forward, us being able to have the hearings on this bill, to be able for people to come and tell their story, to explain why it's so important. And as we continue, and you all continue to talk to our colleagues to move this needle. But thank you so much for being here today. I really believe that we are bending that arc towards justice, but it takes all of us to do that together. So thank you again so much for giving us your time this morning and all the work you do. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
We are done.